The joint compound was still wet on my hands when I heard the piano. It wasn't coming from the east wing, where it should have been, where I'd spent the last 3 hours supervising the installation of the crown molding that had finally arrived from the mill in Montpelier, 6 months late, and where the restoration crew had been laying fresh plaster all week. It was coming from the main house, from the birchwood room, which is what we call the formal dining room at Millbrook House. I stood at the base of the servants' staircase and listened. Piano, yes, and underneath it the low hum of conversation, the clink of glassware, a laugh that carried too much confidence for a space that was supposed to be empty. I had 40 guests in that room. I didn't have to see them to know. I had also been supposed to be in Nashville until tomorrow afternoon. Let me back up, because context matters here. 4 years ago, I bought a condemned Victorian on 3 acres in the Green Mountains of Vermont with my divorce settlement, and every dollar I'd managed to save across 12 years of managing other people's hotels. Every contractor in a 50-mile radius told me it was a teardown. I gutted it to the studs, replaced the plumbing, rewired the electrical, refinished the original pine floors by hand when the crew I hired walked off the job because I'd run out of budget to pay them properly. 9 rooms. A dining room that seats 40. A covered porch that looks out over a valley that in October turns colors you don't believe until you see them. My staff calls me the foreman. I've earned it. I was supposed to be at the Boutique Hospitality Expo in Nashville, registered 8 months ago, 2 nights at the conference hotel, everything arranged so the inn could run without me. But the crown molding I'd been waiting on since April arrived 2 days early, hand-milled to match the original Victorian profile, and I could not be 6 hours away while someone else decided how it got installed. Not this molding. Not in this house. So I canceled my last night, rebooked my flight, drove straight from Burlington Airport to the East Wing in the clothes I'd had on since 4 that morning. Paint-stained cargo pants, an old Henley with a bleach mark on the sleeve, steel-toed boots that had broken in over 4 years of renovation work and were the most comfortable things I owned. I had joint compound under my fingernails and plaster dust in my hair, and a utility knife clipped to my belt. That was what I looked like when I heard the piano, and understood that someone had filled my dining room with 40 strangers. I didn't move right away. I set my tray of tools down quietly and walked to the service corridor, the narrow hallway behind the kitchen that connects to the butler's pantry, with a small window that looks into the birchwood room. I stopped there. 40 people in cocktail attire, a hired pianist at the Steinway I'd bought at auction 3 years ago, flower arrangements on every table, cream and blush roses, the kind that run $300 a centerpiece. Printed menus in small brass holders, waitstaff in white shirts and black vests that I didn't recognize, which told me someone had brought in outside catering. And there, at the head of the long center table, wearing a sport coat I recognized as new because the last time I'd seen my brother he was wearing a Carhartt jacket borrowed from our father that he'd never returned, was my brother. 30 years old, between ventures for the last 2.5 years, which was how he described unemployment when he was being generous with himself. Charming in the way that certain people are charming, the kind that has never once required actual effort. Next to him was his girlfriend. I'd met her twice. She was genuinely lovely. Her father, who was sitting across the table with the focused quiet of someone who listens more than he speaks, had spent 30 years building a hospitality real estate portfolio across New England that was by any measure substantial. I understood immediately what I was looking at. I also knew that if I walked in right now, my brother would find a way to spin it. He had been doing that since we were children, reframing things mid-sentence until you questioned your own memory of events. So I went to find my assistant manager first. Her name was Britt. She'd been with me 3 weeks, fresh out of hospitality school, detail-oriented and eager in the way that people are when they're still figuring out which rules to question. She was in my office when I found her sitting very straight, which told me she already knew something had gone wrong. "Show me the email," I said. She didn't ask which one. She pulled it up and turned the monitor toward me. The address read millbrookhouse@gmail.com. My actual address was millbrook.mgr@millbrookhousefat.com. Close enough that you wouldn't notice the difference if you weren't looking for it. Close enough if you'd only been on the job 3 weeks and had no reason to distrust message from the manager about a private family event. The email read, "Britt, I'm authorizing a private estate dinner for my family this Saturday. My brother will coordinate with the catering team he's bringing in. Please open the reserve wine cabinet for his use and accommodate whatever setup he requests. Do not reach out to me while I'm at the expo. I'll be checking messages intermittently. Many thanks." Signed with my name. I read it twice, then I set it down. My brother hadn't gotten carried away. He hadn't overstepped in the impulsive, thoughtless way that people who love you sometimes do. He had created a fraudulent email identity, forged my authorization, and used it to take control of my property, my staff, and my wine cellar to stage a performance for a man with real money, presenting my inn as a family estate in which he had the standing to offer a partnership stake. There was a specific federal statute for that, several of them actually. "It's not your fault," I told Britt. She looked like she'd been about to cry since I walked in. "You did what the email asked, stay in this office, don't speak to anyone until I come back." I went to find my head of security. Ray had been with me since year 2, ex-resort security from a property in Stowe, 20 years of experience, and a 12-camera system he ran with 2 staff members, and the kind of quiet competence that makes you sleep better knowing someone is watching. He took one look at me when I walked into the security room and didn't say a word about the plaster dust. I told him what I'd found, his jaw tightened. "You want me to call the sheriff?" "Not yet." I pulled up a chair, still in my work clothes, and sat down in front of the monitors. "I want to watch first." So we watched. My brother moved through that dining room like he'd been born in it. He kept his girlfriend's father engaged, refilled glasses before they emptied, held the conversation at exactly the right temperature. He talked about the property with the particular reverence of someone who has observed real work closely enough to absorb the vocabulary without ever having to do any of it. About 40 minutes in, her father asked the question I had been waiting for. "What's the long-term plan for the property?" My brother leaned back in his chair. "We've been talking about expanding the event operation," he said. "Opening it up beyond private family use. The location is unbeatable, the infrastructure is there. We just need the right investment partner to take it to the next level. Someone who understands this market." Her father nodded slowly, gave nothing away. I watched my brother reach for the bottle on the table and recognized the label before the camera could confirm it. My grandfather's Reserve Bordeaux, 2004. The 12 bottles he'd brought back from a trip to France the year before he got sick, the ones I'd kept in the locked cellar since I inherited them, because they were worth more to me as a connection to him than they would ever be as product. I had specifically excluded those bottles from the event inventory when I set up the cellar last year, because they were not for sale, not for guests, not for anything except a moment I chose. Britt had opened the cellar, my brother had asked her to. The bill she'd printed for me ran to $74,200. Wine from the reserve cabinet, $11,800. The outside catering service my brother had hired without my knowledge, $18,400. Wagyu tenderloin, $4,600. Florals, pianist fee, printed menus embossed with Millbrook House, private estate. And at the bottom of the second page, in Britt's handwriting, guest requested all Reserve Bordeaux decanted for table service. Decanted, for table service, my grandfather's wine. Ray asked me again if I wanted the sheriff. "I want every dollar fully spent," I said. "I want him to propose a stake in this property on camera. I want it documented." "Boss." Ray said it carefully, the way he does when he's weighing something. "He's your brother." He told the room I was the property manager they kept on, I said. "In front of those people. That's been the story he's been telling for weeks." Ray picked up his radio without another word. We sat in that room for 2.5 hours. I didn't eat, didn't change, didn't move from the chair except once to refill my water glass. The plaster in my hair dried into something solid. The joint compound on my knuckles cracked when I flexed my hands. I watched the dinner on 12 screens, appetizers, main course, dessert cart from a bakery I didn't recognize because my brother had ordered it without asking. I watched my grandfather's wine get poured into glasses held by people who had no idea what they were drinking. At around 9, her father pulled my brother aside. They moved to the library. I switched to that camera and turned up the audio. "I want to be straightforward with you," her father said. He had the voice of someone who has spent decades in rooms where the numbers are real. "I've been doing my due diligence on this property." My brother kept his expression steady, but something shifted behind it. "The deed," her father said, "is registered to a single individual, not a family trust, one person, and it's not you." "I had someone pull it 3 weeks ago," he continued. "I always verify before a conversation like this one." I stood up. "Ray," I said, "it's time." I came in through the side door that connects the east wing corridor to the dining room, the one that opens directly behind the serving station. No announcement. I stepped through it into the warm light of the Birchwood room and let the door close behind me. The pianist stopped. I was still in my cargo pants and my old Henley and my steel-toed boots, which hit the restored pine floor with a sound that carried across the now silent room. I had a POS terminal in my left cargo pocket and plaster dust in my hair, and a utility knife clipped to my belt, and I must have been something to see, because the wave of silence that moved through that room as 40 people registered my presence was complete and immediate. My brother came back from the library and saw me, and the color left his face. "You're supposed to be in Nashville," he said. I walked past him to the center table and picked up the decanter, held it up to the chandelier. "This bottle," I said, and my voice was completely level. The voice I get when I have already decided what I'm going to do, and there is nothing left to think through. "And the 3 others from the same case that were consumed tonight belonged to a set my grandfather purchased in 2006. He brought 12 bottles home from Bordeaux. I inherited them. Current market value is $4,500 per bottle." I set the decanter down. "In the state of Vermont, receiving property valued over $10,000 without authorization constitutes grand larceny," I said. "We cleared that threshold around the time the second decanter was poured." I pulled the PS terminal from my pocket. A flake of dry joint compound fell off it onto the white tablecloth. "Here's what happens now," I said. "You pay the $74,200 charged to this property tonight, right now, with a card that works. Or I call the sheriff's department, and you explain to them, and to everyone in this room, how you came to be hosting an investor dinner in a property you don't own." His girlfriend was standing near the fireplace. I didn't look at her directly. What had happened to her wasn't something she'd signed up for. My brother reached for his wallet. I watched him understand in real time that the number I'd just said was not a number he had access to. He turned to his girlfriend. She shook her head, not cruelly, just clearly. Her father walked back into the room, and the room reorganized itself around him the way rooms do when someone with genuine authority enters. He looked at me, took in the work clothes and the plaster dust and the tool on my belt, and something in his expression settled, the way a calculation completes. He walked over and extended his hand. "I'm aware of what's happening here," he said. "I know you are," I said. "I was watching the library." He didn't seem surprised. He produced a card from his jacket, matte black, the kind made of metal, and set it on the table beside the decanter. "I'm covering tonight's bill," he said, not on his behalf. "I understand." I swiped the card, approved in under 5 seconds, $74,200. I handed him the receipt. He folded it once, precisely, and put it in his jacket pocket with the unhurried movement of someone who has managed large sums for a very long time. Then he turned to my brother. "We're done," he said. "Whatever arrangement you thought you were proposing, it's finished. My attorneys will contact you regarding the partnership documents you sent last week." My brother's mouth opened. "Don't," her father said, quiet absolute. I looked at my brother for what I think will be the last time I look at him, the way you look at someone you're still trying to understand. He was standing in my dining room under my chandelier in his new sport coat. The room had changed around him in the last 15 minutes, in a way nothing he owned could protect him from. "I'd like you to leave now," I said. He left. His girlfriend followed. I could hear their voices through the window as they crossed the parking lot, and based on her tone, she had been building toward that conversation for some time before tonight gave her the occasion. Her father stayed until his guests had gone, thanking each of them at the door with the ease of someone for whom hospitality is a practiced and genuine thing. Before he left, he stopped in the doorway to the East Wing corridor and looked down the hall at the work lights still burning above the new molding. "Original Victorian profile?" he asked. "Milled to match what was there," I said. He nodded. "Good," he said. "You can't replicate what was original, you can only restore it or lose it." He gave me a card, simple, cream, his name and a direct line, and told me to call when I was ready to talk about what a real partnership looked like. Then he left, and I stood in my dining room alone in my work clothes, surrounded by the aftermath of my brother's performance, and felt something I can only describe as structural, the particular quiet of a building that has survived something and is still standing. I filed the fraud report with the sheriff's department 2 weeks later. I'm not telling that detail to sound righteous. I'm telling it because intent matters and documentation matters. And I've spent 4 years building something that deserves to be protected with the same precision I put into building it. My parents called more times than I kept track of. My mother left voicemails about difficult periods and family loyalty, and the importance of not letting property come between blood. I listened to each one once, then I deleted them. My brother did not call. I appreciated that, actually. 6 months out, I'm standing in the East Wing with my morning coffee, looking at the crown molding and the first light coming through the restored windows. The contractor who finished the installation said it was the cleanest period restoration he'd seen in 30 years of this work. I told him I'd be recommending him to every innkeeper in Vermont. The civil settlement covered a portion of the $74,200. My brother will be paying it back over 4 years. His girlfriend ended things within 6 weeks of that dinner. Her father and I have had 3 phone calls, the third of which lasted 2 hours. There may be something real taking shape there, properly documented, reviewed by attorneys who read every clause, signed by people who understand exactly what they're agreeing to. I'm not rushing. I've learned that the things worth building take longer than you expect and cost more than you plan for, and that the only real protection against people who want to take what you've made is to know exactly what you own, and be willing to stand in the middle of it, and say so, out loud, clearly, in front of anyone who needs to hear it. Even when you're covered in plaster dust when you do it. Especially then. So I want to hear from you, because I've had 6 months of my mother's version of events, and I'd like some outside perspective. Option A. Should I have cleaned up first? Given my brother a chance to explain himself before I walked into that room. Would the quiet, private conversation have been the more dignified choice? Or option B. Was showing up exactly as I was, in the clothes I'd been wearing since 4 in the morning, doing the actual work of keeping this place standing. The only honest answer to what he'd said about me. Was the plaster dust the point? I know what I'd do again, but I want to hear what you think. Because from where I'm standing, in my east wing, under my crown molding, watching October light come across my valley in the early morning, I think I showed up exactly right. But maybe that's just me.